The pounding started before I was fully awake. Heavy metallic knocks that didn't sound like a neighbor or a delivery. It sounded official, like someone had decided I no longer had the right to sleep in my own home. I sat up straight in bed, my heart already racing. For a moment, I didn't know what day it was. Then I noticed the faint gray light through the blinds and the clock on my nightstand. Just after 6 a.m., my throat felt dry and tight. I pulled on a sweatshirt and stepped into the hallway, moving carefully out of habit, as if the house itself might object to my presence. The knocking came again, followed by a man's voice. "Sheriff's office." Opened the door. My hands went cold. I didn't rush, and I didn't freeze. I moved the way you do when you understand that panic leads to mistakes, and mistakes become a story others tell about you later. I turned on the porch light and looked through the peephole. A deputy stood on my step in a tan uniform and black vest, holding a clipboard. His patrol car was parked at the curb with its lights off, as if he had chosen not to disturb the entire street. Then I noticed them across the road, standing partly in shadow, my parents near the neighbor's mailbox, watching like spectators. My mother's arms were crossed. My father's hands were in his pockets. They didn't look surprised. They looked satisfied. I opened the door with the chain still in place. "Ma'am," the deputy said, calm and direct, "are you Tessa Ward?" "Yes," I answered. He glanced at the papers. "I'm Deputy Romero with the county sheriff's office. I'm here regarding a writ of possession. It's an eviction order." The word eviction landed hard. "This is my house," I said steadily. "There must be a mistake." Deputy Romero didn't react. He had likely heard that response many times. "Ma'am," he replied, "I'm not here to debate ownership. I'm here to carry out a court order." I stared at the document. My name was printed clearly, as if I were a tenant who had failed to pay rent, not the person who paid the taxes, replaced the roof, and planted the tree in the yard with my grandfather years ago. From across the street, my mother called out loudly, "You should have done what family asked." My father added flatly, "Pack! This is happening today." Deputy Romero glanced toward them, then lowered his voice slightly. "Do you have somewhere you can go?" The question was procedural, not personal, but it still tightened my stomach. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Not until you show me what this is." He lifted the top page so I could read it without stepping outside. The words were clear: writ of possession, a case number, a court seal, and a judge's signature I didn't recognize. My pulse tried to rise, but I held it steady. I didn't shout or cry. I didn't ask my parents why, because I already understood. They didn't need a reasonable explanation, only one that sounded acceptable to strangers. I pointed to a line. "Who filed this?" Deputy Romero followed my finger. He hesitated briefly. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "the plaintiff is." He stopped, checked the paperwork again, then looked back at me. His expression shifted slightly. Not shock or sympathy, but recognition. He cleared his throat. "It was filed by Diane Ward and Mark Ward." Across the street, my parents made no effort to hide their involvement. My mother lifted her chin, almost proud. Something inside me went very still. If they were the plaintiffs, then they hadn't just threatened me. They had gone to court and presented themselves as the reasonable party. And if a writ had been issued, it meant a judgment had already been entered without me present. I kept my voice even. "When was this case filed?" Deputy Romero checked the page. "Judgment was entered last week." Last week. I had been here, going to work, coming home, watering plants, sleeping in this house. I had never been in court. I had never received any notice. Where was I served? I asked. He looked down again, this time pausing longer. Service address listed as 128 Maple Terrace. I didn't respond immediately because the information didn't match reality. Maple Terrace was not my address and never had been in my adult life. It was the small rental my parents had lived in 15 years earlier, the one with the cracked driveway and leaning mailbox. I hadn't been there since high school. "That's not my address," I said calmly. "That's not where I live." His jaw tightened slightly. "It's what's listed on the return of service." From across the street, my mother called again in a softer tone, as if performing, "We tried to do this the easy way, Tessa. You forced us." I ignored her and looked at the deputy. "Can you show me the return of service?" He turned back a page. "I can show you what I have." The document stated service had been completed, with a signature, date, time, and a description that made my skin cold. Substitute service accepted by adult female occupant at Maple Terrace. My parents had used an address they controlled and claimed someone there accepted papers for me. I looked across the street. My mother met my eyes calmly, as if she had rehearsed this outcome. At that moment, I understood the purpose of the eviction. It wasn't only about removing me. It was about pressure, forcing me to pack quickly, lose control of the property, and become too disorganized to challenge the process. If I didn't act immediately, the deputy would legally remove me from the house my grandfather had left to me. I kept my voice low. "This house belonged to my grandfather," I told Deputy Romero. "He left it to me." The deputy didn't argue. He held the papers firmly, as if he disliked his role in the situation. "Ma'am, if you believe the order was obtained improperly, you need to contact the court immediately and file an emergency motion. I can't advise you on the process." I nodded. "I understand." He checked the document again, then looked at me carefully. "There's one more thing. This writ authorizes same-day possession." My stomach tightened. Same day. "Without a judge's stay," he continued, "I have to clear the house by noon." I didn't argue. A confrontation would only create the scene my parents wanted. Instead, I focused on what mattered: documentation. I asked him to hold the paper steady while I photographed every page: the case number, court seal, signature, service address, and return language. Then I stepped back inside, closed the door quietly, and locked it. The lock couldn't give me time, but evidence could. Through the window, I could see my parents still watching, waiting for signs of panic. I didn't give them any. I collected my wallet, keys, phone, and a small fireproof pouch containing the essentials: my deed copy, my grandfather's probate distribution letter, property tax records, and my homeowner's insurance policy in my name. Then, standing in my kitchen, I called the courthouse clerk's office. The phone rang twice. "Civil Division," a woman answered briskly. "I have a writ of possession for an eviction," I said evenly. "I was never served. I need to know how to request an emergency stay and set aside a default." There was a pause, followed by the sound of typing, the kind of pause that meant she had located the case and was reviewing it. "What's the case number?" she asked. I read it aloud. She typed longer this time. When she spoke again, her tone was slightly less formal. "Ma'am," she said, "this is an unlawful detainer filed by Mark and Diane Ward. Default judgment entered last week. I was never served." I repeated that the service address listed was Maple Terrace. "That's not my address." There was a pause, followed by more typing. "I see the return," she said carefully. "It shows substitute service accepted by an adult female occupant." "That would be my mother," I replied, keeping my voice steady because if I allowed anger to take over, I would lose time. "What do I do right now?" "You need to file an emergency motion to stay enforcement," she said, "and a motion to vacate the default." "How quickly can that be heard?" I asked. She hesitated. "It depends on the judge's calendar." "It has to be today," I said. "The deputy says the house must be cleared by noon." The clerk exhaled softly. "Come to the courthouse as soon as we open. Bring identification and proof of your address. Bring any evidence that you were not served. And if you have proof you own the property, bring that as well." "I do," I answered. "Then don't delay," she added. "If the writ is executed, it becomes more difficult." More difficult meant the kind of difficulty that ruins people financially and then calls it procedure. I ended the call, took the pouch, and returned to the front door. Deputy Romero was still on the porch waiting patiently. My parents remained across the street watching. I opened the door with the chain still in place. "I'm going to the courthouse," I told him. "I'm filing an emergency stay." He nodded once. "That's what you need to do." My mother called out in a falsely gentle tone, "You can file whatever you want. It's already done." The deputy's jaw tightened, but he said nothing to her. Instead, he looked at me and spoke more quietly. "I can't give legal advice, but if you get a signed stay order, call our civil unit immediately. They'll instruct me not to execute." "I understand," I said. "Can you give me the number?" He hesitated, then wrote it on a card and slid it through the gap in the door. My father spoke louder. "Pack your things. Don't make this worse." I met his eyes across the street. "You made it worse when you lied to a judge," I said evenly. My mother's expression tightened, though she kept her smile. I closed the door without another word. left through the back, walked around the fence, and drove away without passing them. On the way to the courthouse, the morning light spread across the sky, making everything look ordinary. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my thoughts were not. I kept thinking about Maple Terrace, about my parents accepting papers meant for me and presenting that as proper service, about how easily a false step becomes a judgment when you don't even know you were supposed to appear. When the courthouse opened, I was already there. The building smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. At security, I placed the writ paperwork on the tray and said, "I have an eviction being executed today." The guard's attention sharpened, and he waved me through quickly. Upstairs, the civil division counter had a short line of people holding folders tightly, as if holding on to air. I waited without fidgeting. When it was my turn, I slid my ID and the photos forward. I need an emergency stay and a motion to vacate. I was never served. The service address is incorrect. The clerk, a tired-looking man with a badge clipped to his collar, entered the case number and frowned almost immediately. "You live at this address?" he asked, reading from the file. "No, that address is my parents' old residence. I've never lived there as an adult." He clicked again, opened a scanned document, and turned the monitor slightly toward me. It was the proof of service form, including a signature line and a description of the adult female occupant who supposedly accepted the papers. My stomach tightened. The signature was unclear, but the printed name beneath it was neat. Diane Ward. My mother hadn't even tried to hide it. "She signed for it," I said quietly. The clerk raised his eyebrows slightly. "She's the plaintiff." "Yes, and she accepted service on my behalf at an address where I don't live." He studied the screen a moment longer, then printed the form and slid it under the glass. "Highlight that," he said softly. "It matters." I kept my hand steady. "I also own the house," I added, taking out the deed copy and the probate distribution letter from the pouch, my grandfather's name at the top and mine listed as the recipient. The clerk looked at the deed and blinked, then began typing more quickly. "Your parents filed this as landlords," he said, his tone tightening. "They're claiming you're a tenant holding over." "A tenant?" I repeated evenly. He opened another scanned exhibit and turned the screen again. It was a one-page rental agreement. My name was typed at the top, my parents listed as landlords, and a signature at the bottom that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. It looked like someone had tried to copy my handwriting and stopped halfway. "They forged it," I said. The clerk didn't agree or disagree. "If you want the judge to see this today, you need to file your emergency motion now. I'll give you the forms and a hearing request." He handed me a thick packet, still warm from the printer. At the top were the words "emergency motion to stay." "Which judge?" I asked. He checked the docket. "Judge Halprin." "Can I be heard this morning?" He hesitated and glanced toward a door labeled Judicial Assistant. "I'll try, but you need to understand." "I understand," I said calmly. "If I don't get a stay, a deputy clears my house by noon." He nodded slightly and stamped the packet. The stamp came down firmly, ink spreading across the page. He handed it back. "Go to Department 14. Ask the assistant for an emergency slot." As I turned to leave, he added quietly, "Miss Ward?" I looked back. He nodded toward the deed. "If that deed is recorded in your name, your parents' eviction case has a standing problem. Judges don't like standing problems." I thanked him, not as a favor, but as useful information. Outside Department 14, I sat on a wooden bench and completed the motion carefully, writing slowly and clearly. Every line was deliberate. Under supporting evidence, I listed exactly what the record showed. Wrong address, plaintiff accepted service, forged lease, recorded deed in my name. Then I stood, went to the assistant's window, and slid the packet inside. She read the first page, then the second. When she reached the proof of service, her expression shifted, not dramatically, but with attention. She looked up. "You're saying the plaintiff accepted service for the defendant?" "Yes." She studied me for a moment, then stood and went through the door behind her. I waited with my hands folded, breathing evenly, listening to muted voices inside the judge's chambers. When she returned, she held my packet more carefully. Leaning toward the window, she spoke quietly. "Judge Halprin will see you, but I need to warn you. Your parents attached another document to their filing. And if it is what it appears to be, this is more than an eviction." My stomach tightened. "What document?" A deed, she said. A recorded deed claiming the house was transferred back to them. The cold feeling returned, but my expression didn't change. A deed? Transferred back to them? She nodded. It's in the court file. You'll see it in front of the judge. I didn't argue or demand to see it immediately. I simply nodded. Thank you. Then I followed her into Department 14. The courtroom was smaller than the lobby, quieter, and formal. A few attorneys sat scattered with laptops open. One man in a worn suit stared down at his hands. And then I saw my parents. They were seated near the front with their attorney, a silver-haired man with a composed posture, the type hired to appear reasonable. My mother wore a soft cardigan and a concerned expression, as if she had come to help me. My father faced forward, jaw set. They didn't look anxious. They looked prepared. When my mother saw me, she offered a small, sympathetic smile, as if she were about to perform concern. I did not respond. The bailiff called the case number, and we stepped forward to the tables. Judge Halpern took the bench and immediately looked down at the file with a frown that suggested she had already seen something concerning. "Good morning," she said. "We have an emergency motion to stay enforcement of a writ of possession. Miss Ward, you're the defendant?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "And you're appearing without counsel today?" "Yes." Her attention briefly shifted to my parents' attorney. "Counsel Lawrence Pike for the plaintiffs, Your Honor." Judge Halpern nodded, then returned her focus to me. "Miss Ward, you understand the writ authorizes possession today?" "Yes," I said. The deputy said noon. She did not react to the urgency, only to the procedure. "Tell me why I should issue an emergency stay." I slid my packet forward, hand steady. "Because I was never properly served. The proof of service shows the plaintiff accepted substitute service at an address where I do not live. The address is not mine, and the plaintiff signed the service form." Judge Halpern's eyes narrowed slightly. "The plaintiff signed the service form?" "Yes." Mr. Pike gave a faint smile, as if preparing to explain the issue away. The judge turned to him. "Counsel, is that accurate?" He stood, voice controlled. "Your Honor, service was completed according to statute. Substitute service is permitted. The occupant accepted." Judge Halpern raised a hand. "Don't recite the statute. Answer the question. Did your client sign as the adult female occupant who accepted substitute service?" He hesitated briefly, then answered, "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Ward accepted service at the address listed as Miss Ward's last known address." Judge Halpern looked back at me. "Is Maple Terrace your last known address?" "No, I have not lived there as an adult. My driver's license, tax bills, and utility records show my current address." I slid my ID and a recent utility bill forward. She reviewed them, then turned to my mother. "Mrs. Ward, why did you accept service on behalf of the defendant at an address that is not her residence?" My mother's expression shifted into practiced concern. "Your Honor, we tried everything. She's been unstable. She stopped responding to us. We didn't know what else to do." The word unstable was clearly intended to shape the narrative. Judge Halpern did not react emotionally. "That's not an answer," she said. "You either knew where she lived or you didn't." My father leaned forward slightly. "We were trying to protect the property." "Protect it from whom?" the judge asked. He didn't respond. My mother lowered her eyes. Mr. Pike stepped in quickly. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs own the home. They needed to recover possession. The defendant has refused to leave." Judge Halpern turned back to him. "I've reviewed the exhibits," she said, her tone tightening. "One of them is a deed." She lifted a page. "Exhibit C is a recorded quitclaim deed transferring the property from Tessa Ward to Mark and Diane Ward, recorded 2 weeks ago." My mother inhaled softly. My father remained still. The judge looked at me. "Miss Ward, did you sign a quitclaim deed transferring this property to your parents 2 weeks ago?" "No." Mr. Pike spoke smoothly. "Your Honor, the deed is notarized and recorded." The judge's eyes moved sharply to him. "I didn't ask you." Then she looked at me again. "You're saying the deed is fraudulent?" "Yes, and I can prove I was not present for any notarization. I was at work that day. My employer has badge access and security camera logs." Her pen stopped. "Access logs?" "Yes. Time-stamped entry records." Mr. Pike's expression tightened. "Your Honor, this is becoming a title dispute. Probate matters belong in another department." Judge Halpern's tone hardened. "This is not a probate issue at the moment. This is an unlawful detainer filed by parties claiming ownership, supported by a deed the defendant says she never signed, combined with a service return signed by the plaintiff at an incorrect address. She paused, then said clearly, I am not comfortable enforcing a writ of possession on this record. Mr. Pike began to speak, but she stopped him. I will address the stay first. Miss Ward, do you have proof of current recorded ownership in your name? Yes. I provided the recorder's office property summary I had obtained that morning. She reviewed it. It shows the property was distributed to you through your grandfather's estate last year. Then a quitclaim deed was recorded 2 weeks ago, transferring it to your parents. And you deny signing that deed? Yes. Judge Halpern leaned back and examined the notary block. Her eyes narrowed. She tapped the commission number with her pen. Counsel, whose notary is this? Mr. Pike glanced down. It appears to be a notary named Carla Mendez. The judge looked at my father. Mr. Ward, do you know Carla Mendez? He hesitated. My mother answered quietly, She's a friend. Judge Halpern held her gaze. A friend who notarized a deed transferring your daughter's inherited property to you 2 weeks ago. Mr. Pike tried again. Your Honor, the deed is recorded. It is presumptively valid. Presumptively valid is not immune, the judge replied. She turned to the bailiff. I am issuing an emergency stay of the writ of possession, effective immediately. Notify the sheriff's civil unit. I exhaled slowly, keeping my composure. Judge Halpern continued, voice firm. This matter is stayed pending a hearing on the motion to vacate default and a referral for potential fraud regarding the deed. My mother began, Your Honor. Stop, the judge said. You don't speak now. Then she addressed me. Miss Ward, if this deed is fraudulent, you need to do more than stop the eviction. You must protect the title immediately. I understand, she nodded. I am ordering that the county recorder be notified of a potential fraudulent conveyance, and I want the notary to appear in person with her journal. That instruction changed the atmosphere. A notary journal contains dates, identification details, and signatures, objective evidence. Judge Halpern set the file down. Hearing tomorrow morning. Miss Ward, bring your employment access logs. Plaintiffs will bring the notary and the original deed. Failure to appear will have consequences. As the judge left the bench, the bailiff distributed copies of the stay order. I took mine and exited without looking at my parents. In the hallway, my phone rang. Deputy Romero, I answered. I got the stay. His relief was clear. Copy that. Text me a photo of the signed order. I'll notify civil and stand down. I'm sending it now. I photographed the order and sent it. As I turned toward the stairs, my mother's voice came from behind me, low and tense. You think this ends it? You don't understand what you've started. I didn't turn around. If the deed was false, this was no longer just an eviction issue. It was about how far they were willing to go, and the evidence would show it. I didn't return home immediately, not out of fear, but because I needed to control the next steps. After sending the stay to Deputy Romero, I called the sheriff's civil unit directly to confirm. Yes, ma'am, the dispatcher said. We have the stay on file. Enforcement is suspended. Then I drove to the county recorder's office. It was early, and the waiting area had the quiet routine of administrative work. People sat with marriage certificates, lien releases, and tax documents. I took a number and waited. When called, I approached the counter and presented my ID, the property record summary, my grandfather's estate distribution deed, and the quitclaim deed that had been recorded 2 weeks earlier. I need to place a fraud alert on my property record, I said. A judge issued a stay today and referred this deed for potential fraud. The clerk, in her mid-30s with a focused expression, entered the deed number. Her face changed quickly. Ma'am, this quitclaim was recorded 2 weeks ago, she said. Yes. And it was submitted in person, she continued, reviewing the intake notes, with a notary acknowledgement attached. I did not sign it, I said calmly. The judge has ordered the notary to appear with her journal tomorrow. The clerk did not respond with sympathy. She responded with attention. She responded with procedure. Do you have the case number? She asked. I gave it to her. She entered it into a notes field and printed a short form. Fill this out. We'll attach a fraud alert flag to the parcel record. It doesn't invalidate the deed automatically, she explained, but it places a public notice that the transfer is disputed and may trigger extra verification if anyone tries to record additional documents. That was exactly what I needed. I signed the form in my normal signature, slow and consistent, and returned it. The clerk stamped it and added it to the file. Then she did something that tightened my focus again. She opened the deed's digital image and zoomed in on the notary block. "May I ask you something?" she said carefully. "Yes." She tapped the screen. "Do you know why the notary's commission number looks unusual?" "Unusual how?" She turned the monitor toward me. One digit in the commission number had been crossed out and rewritten, small enough to miss unless you were trained to catch intake issues. "That kind of correction should normally trigger a rejection," she said quietly, but it didn't. It was accepted. I studied the screen. A correction in a legal acknowledgement is not a minor error. It creates an opening. "Can you print that image?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, and I'll include the intake metadata." When she handed me the pages, they were official and recent, the kind of documentation that would matter later. I left the recorder's office with the fraud alert confirmation and drove home, my thoughts clear and structured. If the deed was forged, the possibilities were limited. A false notarization, a signature that wasn't mine, or identification that was inaccurate or fabricated. The assumption had been that I would be too shocked to respond quickly. That assumption was wrong. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked ordinary, quiet morning light on the siding. My parents' car was still across the street. They were watching. I didn't give them a reaction. I went inside, locked the door, and sat at the kitchen table. Then I made the next call. I contacted my employer, not to complain, but to request records. "Security," a man answered. "This is Tessa Ward. I need badge access logs for 2 weeks ago, specifically the full day of the 13th. There was a pause. "May I ask why?" "Because a deed was filed claiming I signed it in front of a notary that day, and I need to document where I was." His tone changed immediately. "Understood. I'll need an email request and the case number." "I have one," I said, and provided it. "We'll pull badge entries and parking gate logs. If camera footage is still available, we'll preserve it." Preserve. That word mattered. When the call ended, I looked out the front window. My mother was pacing on the sidewalk with her phone. My father stood with his arms crossed, watching the house. Then the doorbell rang. Once, then again. I didn't go to the door immediately. I opened my phone's camera and began recording, capturing the time and audio. Then I approached the door and spoke without unlocking it. "Yes?" My mother's voice came through the door. "Open the door." "No." My father spoke next. "We're here to resolve this like family." I kept my tone level. "You filed an eviction, created a lease, and recorded a deed. That isn't family. That's fraud." My mother raised her voice. "How dare you?" Instead of responding, I asked, "Why did you do it?" There was a brief silence. Then my father answered quietly, "Because your grandfather wanted the house to stay in the family, and you were making decisions we didn't approve." I felt my jaw tighten. "I am the family." My mother snapped, "You're ungrateful. He would have wanted us to have it." "He didn't," I said. "That's why the deed is in my name." My father lowered his voice further. "Tomorrow the notary will say you signed." "Then tomorrow she'll produce her journal," I replied, "and it will show what she actually verified." My mother's tone softened again. "You don't want to ruin lives over paperwork, Tessa." That statement clarified their concern. This wasn't about the property anymore. It was about the record. "You already made your choice," I said. "I'm making sure everything is documented correctly." I ended the conversation by stopping communication. After a moment, my mother said, "Fine. See you in court." I didn't stop recording until I heard their car doors close. About an hour later, an email arrived from my employer's security office. Badge access logs, requested date. I opened the attachment. Entry times, exit times, internal access points, parking gate records. The log showed I entered that morning and did not leave until after 6 p.m. There was no gap, no opportunity to leave, sign a document, and return unnoticed. A second email followed from the county recorder. Fraud alert confirmation. It included the official notice and the image showing the altered notary commission number. I organized the documents on the table. The next day would not depend on statements. It would depend on evidence and on what the notary's journal showed. Just before closing my laptop, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you show up tomorrow, you'll lose more than a house." I didn't respond. I took a screenshot, saved it under the case number, and forwarded it to myself with the subject line, Threat received, night before hearing. Then I did the most practical thing possible. I went to sleep. Not comfortably, but deliberately. Fatigue leads to mistakes, and the situation required precision. At 8:45 the next morning, I returned to Department 14 with a single folder and a composed expression. My parents were already there with their attorney. My mother wore a different cardigan, as if presentation could change the narrative. My father looked impatient, focused on the bench. Behind them sat the notary, Carla Mendez. She looked tense, controlled, not confident. When the bailiff called the case, Judge Halpern took the bench with the same focused expression as the day before, but sharper. Good morning. We are here on the defendant's motion to vacate default and the court's concerns regarding a recorded quitclaim deed submitted as an exhibit. She looked at my parents' attorney. Counsel, do you have the original deed? Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Pike said, holding up a manila envelope. The judge then turned to the notary. Miss Mendez, you are a commissioned notary public in this state. Yes, Your Honor, Carla answered quietly. And you notarized a deed transferring property from Tessa Ward to Mark and Diane Ward on the 13th? Yes, Judge Halpern's tone remained steady. Then you will produce your notary journal. Carla hesitated briefly. Mr. Pike spoke quickly. Your Honor, the notarization was completed properly. The acknowledgement is sufficient. The journal is not necessary. The judge looked at him directly. Sit down. He sat. Journal, she repeated. Carla opened her purse with unsteady hands and removed a small black notebook. It was passed to the judge. The courtroom grew quiet as Judge Halpern reviewed the entries. After a moment, she stopped and looked up. Miss Mendez, please tell the court what identification you verified for Tessa Ward on the 13th. Her driver's license, Carla said. The judge looked back at the journal. The entry lists a license number ending in 931. My attention sharpened. That was not my number. She looked at me. Miss Ward, what are the last 3 digits of your driver's license? 617. Judge Halpern nodded once, then turned back to the notary. Her voice was calm but firm. So the journal does not match the defendant's actual identification. Please explain. Carla hesitated. Her eyes moved briefly toward my parents, quick but noticeable. Mr. Pike stood abruptly. Your Honor, journals can contain clerical mistakes. Judge Halpern interrupted him. Enough. She angled the journal slightly and read the next line into the record. This entry lists the signer as Tessa Ward, she said. And under signature there is a mark that does not resemble the signature on the defendant's filings. She looked at Carla. Did you personally witness Tessa Ward sign this deed in your presence? Carla's voice came out tight. Yes. Judge Halpern did not raise her tone. She reached for the printout I had submitted the previous day, my employer's access logs, and held them up. Miss Ward, she said, you stated you were at work for the entire day. Yes, I replied. Do you have documentation? She asked, showing you were physically present? Yes, I said, sliding forward the badge logs and the security office certification email. Then I added the detail people like my father often forget exists, my parking gate record with a timestamp plate scan. Judge Halpern reviewed the first page, then the second. Her eyes narrowed at the times. Then she turned back to Carla. Miss Mendez, she asked, at what time did you notarize this deed? Carla swallowed. Around noon. Judge Halpern looked at the log. The defendant's badge record shows her inside a secured building at noon with internal door access, she said. Her parking gate record shows her vehicle inside the controlled garage. She did not leave. Carla's expression tightened and her voice wavered slightly. Maybe it was later. Judge Halpern checked the journal again. Your journal lists the time as 12:15, she said. So no, not later. Mr. Pike looked as if he wished he could disappear. My mother's hands were clenched so tightly her fingers turned pale. My father stared forward, as if ignoring the evidence might make it irrelevant. Judge Halpern set the journal down carefully and leaned forward. Miss Mendez, she said, are you aware of the consequences of notarizing a signature you did not witness? Carla's eyes filled with panic. Yes. Then I will ask you one final time, Judge Halpern said. Did you witness Tessa Ward sign this deed? Carla's mouth trembled and her eyes shifted again toward my parents. My mother shook her head slightly, small and urgent. My father did not react. Carla exhaled unsteadily, and when she spoke, the statement finally gave way to the truth. No, she whispered. I didn't. The courtroom did not erupt. It simply shifted, as if the truth had reset the entire room. Judge Halpern's voice became firm and precise. "Thank you," she said. "That is all." My mother made a small sound, half shock, half anger, then closed her mouth quickly, as if remembering the setting. Mr. Pike stood again, voice strained. "Your Honor, this is beyond the scope." Judge Halpern raised her hand. "Sit down." He sat. Judge Halpern addressed my parents. "Mark Ward," she said. "Diane Ward." They rose slowly, as if the weight in the room had changed. Judge Halpern spoke calmly. "This court is vacating the default judgment. The writ of possession is dissolved. The unlawful detainer is dismissed for lack of proper service and lack of standing." My father's mouth opened, but the judge continued. "This court is referring the quitclaim deed to the district attorney for investigation of fraudulent conveyance and conspiracy, and referring the notary to the commissioning authority for possible revocation." My mother's eyes widened. "Your Honor," Judge Halpern stopped her with a look. "No." Then she turned to me. "Miss Ward, you will obtain a certified copy of today's order and record it with the county recorder. You will also pursue a title correction through the proper civil process. Based on what I have reviewed, you should consider an emergency restraining order as well." "I will," I said. Judge Halpern nodded once, then added the statement that finally unsettled my parents. "And if either plaintiff attempts any further action to remove you from that property, contact law enforcement immediately. This court's orders are not suggestions." The hearing ended with forms, stamps, and the kind of silence that follows when people realize the system is no longer working in their favor. Outside the courtroom, my parents did not approach me. They couldn't. Mr. Pike avoided eye contact, speaking to them in short, low sentences as he guided them toward the exit. Carla Mendes left in the opposite direction, face pale, holding her purse tightly. I went straight downstairs to the clerk's office and requested certified copies. The stamp came down firmly again and again. Certified, certified, certified. Then I drove directly to the county recorder's office and recorded the judge's order on the parcel record, attaching it to the fraud alert already in place. The clerk who had helped me the day before did not smile. She simply nodded when she saw the judge's signature, as if the documentation had finally caught up. On my way out, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time the message was shorter. Forget it. I took a screenshot anyway, because people like my parents do not stop out of regret. They stop when the options close. Over the following weeks, I watched the consequences move forward without pushing them. The recorder's office confirmed the deed was flagged and under investigation. The notary's commission went into review. My employer's security team preserved footage showing me entering the building that morning and never leaving. The sheriff's civil unit added the stay and dismissal order to their system so no one could arrive early with paperwork and present it as routine. And my parents, people who had spent my life insisting the family name mattered, could no longer meet my eyes without facing their own involvement in a false record. They never apologized. Accountability was not something they were prepared to face. My mother sent one email attempting to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. My father sent nothing at all. But I did not need apologies. I needed my house, and I needed my grandfather's gift to remain where he intended it, with the person he trusted. One evening, I stood in the living room and watched sunlight come through the windows, the same windows my parents had tried to claim using false documents in court. I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. The kind of calm that comes when you stop asking to be treated fairly and begin relying on documented facts. A few weeks later, the street felt normal again. No patrol car at the curb. No parents across the street watching. The fraud alert remained on the property record until the title correction process was completed. Every official letter that arrived went into the same folder, marked with the case number. I replaced the front door lock, installed a small camera by the porch, and kept certified copies of the judge's order in a secure place. Not because I intended to live in fear, but because I chose to live prepared. My parents had shown they were willing to use systems as pressure. I learned to use those same systems as protection. If your parents tried to evict you from a house your grandfather left you, would you confront them directly, or would you take the same approach and let the documentation expose the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories where records speak louder than manipulation, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.